Hey everybody, so there is no doubt that you've already seen one of these before. And no, I don't mean a blue 2019 Ford Ranger. What I do mean is a mid-size pickup with a sticker back there on the side of the bed. And right here is the spot that all pickup truck manufacturers have decided to announce to the world whether or not that truck has an off-road package. So if we're talking about a Ford, it's going to be FX4. If this was a Chevy, it would be Z71. And actually every single one of these mid-size pickup trucks offers an off-road package. So in this video, we're going to go over the details of every single one of those off-road packages. I'm going to tell you what comes with those packages, and then at the end, we're going to rank them all from the best to the worst, so stay tuned. These off-road packages are certainly not created equal, although the upgrades that they do deliver are fairly similar from package to package. So to compare them all, we've broken all of these packages down into three main categories. First up, the tires. Second, approach, departure angle, and ground clearance. That's all one category. And then finally, we're going to talk about off-road gear. And that's a pretty general category, but it can include anything that comes along with the package, like a locking diff or rock rails or different drive modes, anything like that. So first up, let's take a look at exactly what makes up this FX4 package for the Ford Ranger. So what makes up FX4? Well, first, the tires. We get a set of hand-cooked Dynapro ATMs. These are all-terrain tires, and they're pretty decent. They're not quite as aggressive as some other all-terrains you might get on some of these packages, but in my experience, they do work pretty well. Now, the other thing that comes along with FX4 back here in the back, which you can't see, is an electronic locking rear diff. So this diff back here can be fully locked. Now, moving up to the front, one of my favorite features on FX4, and some of the off-road packages do this, but not all of them. Down in the front there, you'll see there's no plastic air dam. All of these trucks have big plastic air dams that hang down in the front for fuel economy, and luckily on FX4 Rangers, that is eliminated. Now let's hop in and I'll show you some of the off-road gear that's on the inside. So down here to my right, we have a button here for the locking diff and a button here for the terrain modes in the middle of this knob, which controls your transfer case. So you have 4 low, 4 high, and 2 high. Now if I hit the terrain mode button, you'll show you all the different terrain modes here on the Ranger, and these are specific to the FX4 model. So we have normal, grass, gravel, snow, mud and ruts, and sand, and you'll see that 4 high came on automatically underneath there, because any of these terrain modes are going to dictate whether the truck should be in 4 high, 4 low, and they'll also change up the throttle response and how the terrain traction control system manages wheel spin. Now the other thing you need to see here is another button over here on the left, and that is for the trail control system. So I press it and you'll see trail control enabled. Now trail control is off-road cruise control. So you set the speed anywhere from 0 all the way up to 30 kilometers an hour, and the truck will keep that speed. You don't need to touch anything with your feet. You just simply drive and allow the truck to handle the throttle and the braking for you. And we can't forget about the clearances here on the Ranger. The Ford Ranger FX4 is good for 8.9 inches of ground clearance, 28.7 degrees of approach, and 25.4 degrees of departure. Finally, how about the price for the FX4? Well, we're talking just a little bit over $1,200 in the US and even more than that in Canada. I'll throw the specific pricing up right here, but if you want this package, it's fairly affordable. Now, let's move on to the next truck, the Chevrolet Colorado. Here's the thing about the Chevy Colorado. There are actually two different off-road packages you can get. So first of all, we have the Z71 package. Now Z71 is a direct competitor to our FX4 here. It's sort of a mild off-road upgrade, if you will. But then you have the ZR2, which is a much more hardcore off-road upgrade. And ZR2 is definitely a step above what you're gonna get out of FX4 or Z71. So right now, let's run down Z71 and ZR2. First up for the Z71, let's talk numbers. So this truck gets 8.1 inches of ground clearance, 17.3 degrees of approach angle, and 22.2 degrees of departure. Now there is one important distinction we need to make between Z71 and a truck like the FX4. So the FX4 package can be added on to multiple trim levels. Here at Chevrolet, the Z71 Colorado is actually a trim level just like the ZR2. So to get up to a Z71, you have to spend a certain amount of money just to get into that package, whereas at Ford you can buy a basic Ranger and still add on the FX4 package. So if we continue just trying to compare package pricing, going for a Z71 is going to cost you $3,000 more than the next trim level down, which is the LT. And for a starting price on Z71 in the United States, you're looking at about $35,000. So what does the Z71 package get you? Well, it brings along Rancho shocks, an automatic locking rear differential, a transfer case shield, unique 17-inch painted wheels, and all-terrain tires. In this case, they are Goodyear Wranglers with Kevlar protection. You're also getting a couple different features on the interior, including automatic climate control, a power adjustable passenger seat, and a heated steering wheel out of the Z71. That's enough on Z71. Now let's look at the real hardcore off-road Colorado, the ZR2 package. Ground clearance for the ZR2 doesn't change from the Z71, but approach and departure angle do. On the ZR2, you're looking at a 30-degree approach and a 23.5-degree departure angle. Now the ZR2, of course, is much more expensive as well. You're looking at about $7,000 more than a Z71, with starting prices coming in at about $42,000 in the US and about $46,000 in Canada. So what are the goodies that come with ZR2? Well, one of the biggest upgrades are the Multimatic DSSV shocks. Now the ZR2 is also slightly wider than the standard Colorado. It gets a set of Goodyear Wrangler Duratrack tires. You're getting a unique hood, fascia, and grille to make sure this thing stands out. And then on the inside, you're getting a full leather interior. Now it's time to move on to the Toyota Tacoma. And just like the Chevrolet, the Tacoma sort of offers two different levels of off-road packages. First, you have the TRD Offroad. That's a competitor for FX4 and Z71. But then you also have the TRD Pro. Now, the Tacoma TRD Pro is a competitor for the ZR2 model from Chevy. And right now, we're going to look at what makes up both of those Tacoma packages. First up with Tacoma, the TRD Off-Road, and let me first say that just like the Chevy, the TRD Off-Road and the TRD Pro, these are trim levels. These are not packages that can be added to other trims. These two are standalone trims. So when we're talking ground clearance on the TRD Off-Road, you're looking at 9.4 inches of clearance, a 32-degree approach angle, and a 23-degree departure angle. For off-road goodies, the TRD Off-Road comes packing Bilstein shocks, a locking rear differential, crawl control, which is essentially off-road cruise control, the multi-terrain select system, which allows you to choose from a number of different terrain settings. You're getting a set of 16-inch wheels wrapped with Goodyear Wrangler all-terrain Kevlar tires. There are durable black plastic fender flares on this truck, and that front plastic air dam that is still there on the Z71, well, it is deleted on the TRD Off-Road. Looking at the price, the TRD Off-Road starts at $35,615 in the US, just about a $4,000 bump up from the TRD Sport. Up here in Canada, things are more expensive, and the TRD Off-Road starts at just over $40,000. But what about that serious off-roader, the TRD Pro? Well, if you upgrade to the TRD Pro, you're going to get a full set of Fox off-road suspension with front coilovers and remote reservoir rear shock absorbers. The truck also gets a 1-inch suspension lift, a TRD 1/4-inch aluminum front skid plate, 16-inch black TRD wheels with a 1-inch wider track. Those are also wrapped in those Goodyear Wranglers with Kevlar protection. The TRD Pro gets a larger anti-sway bar, a unique hood, and to make it sound a little better, a TRD catback exhaust. Easily the upgrade you'll spot first here on the Tacoma TRD Pro is right here. It's not a snorkel, that is the desert air intake. Now the TRD Pro is the most expensive version of the Tacoma, and it doesn't come cheap. In the United States, you're looking at spending about $43,000, while up here in Canada, this truck goes for a kind of ridiculous 57 grand. All right, now it's time to talk Nissan, which means we're gonna run down what makes up the Frontier Pro 4X package. Yes, the Frontier Pro 4X is the oldest of the bunch, but it still has a few tricks up its sleeve. So for ground clearance here on the Frontier, you're looking at 8.9 inches, an approach angle of 32.6 degrees, and a departure angle of 23.3 degrees. Going for the Pro 4X model gets you a set of Hankook DynaPro ATMs and also a number of other off-road goodies like Bilstein off-road shocks, skid plates on the fuel tank, oil pan and transfer case, an electronic rear locking differential, and unique 60-inch aluminum alloy off-road wheels. Pricing for the Pro 4X begins at $33,240, which is roughly the exact same starting price as in Canada. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have the newest pickup truck of the bunch, the brand new Jeep Gladiator, and in this case, we're talking about the Rubicon model. With this Gladiator Rubicon, I do believe we have saved the best for last. So when we're talking about ground clearance, this truck has 11.1 inches, best of any truck on this list. Approach comes in at 43.6 degrees, while departure comes in at 26 degrees. For tires, the Gladiator Rubicon actually goes a different route than the Wrangler Rubicon and uses Falken Wild Peaks, either all-terrains or mud terrains. That's up to you when you buy one of these Rubicons. The list of off-road goodies for the Gladiator Rubicon is pretty long, so listen up. This truck gets a 4:1 low-range ratio and Dana 44 axles in the front and the rear. Now both of those Dana 44s include lockers and electronically disconnecting sway bars. Now underneath you have skid plates to protect everything, and there are front and rear tow hooks to make recovery easier. Now that's not all. The Gladiator Rubicon also gets a front-facing camera, which is unique to this model. You can get a tire pressure monitor warning system, and you get off-road driving modes, including sand and rock mode. The Gladiator Rubicon is also the only vehicle on the market to come standard with a set of steel rock rails. Oh, and we mentioned that they're Falken Wild Peaks, but did we mention that these are 33-inch tires? That's right, this is also the only truck on this list to offer such a big tire straight from the factory. Buying one of these Gladiator Rubicons won't exactly be cheap. In the United States, they start at $43,500, which is a $3,000 jump over the trim below it, which is the Overland. Here in Canada, the Rubicon sells for $54,390. So there you go. Now you know exactly what makes up all of these packages, but which one is best? Well, check out this chart where we've gathered all the information together. Now it's time to pick which one of these packages is the best, and to do so, we are going to use a couple handy charts, which I've laid out very simply. So there are 7 trucks here, and I simply went through and ranked them 1 through 7, and then at the end, added up the scores. So this first chart, we're looking at the tires. Now, because there's only actually 4 different sets of tires, types of tires, we've only given these points out between 1 and 4, but just so you know, I looked at all of these tires and judged them strictly on off-road capability. It has nothing to do with on-road noise or comfort, and everything to do with how they perform once the pavement ends. Next up, this chart compares the ground clearance, approach, and departure angles, and this one is actually completely objective except for the Colorado ZR2. Now it actually has a better approach angle than a Ford Ranger FX4, but it has worse ground clearance, and I'm putting ground clearance as a more important factor than approach angle, which is why the FX4 is just 1 bump ahead of the Colorado. And finally, we rate the off-road equipment, and yes, once again, the Jeep Gladiator has to be on top, thanks to things like 2 locking diffs, those rock rails that I mentioned, disconnecting sway bars, and this one is again a little bit subjective, but I went through all the lists and basically just ranked which vehicles have the more important off-road gear. So 2 locking diffs over 1 moves you up the list. Having a lift moves you up the list. Anything that's going to help off-road. And in this chart, we've added up all the scores and we see a pretty clear winner. So there you have it. At least on paper, the Jeep Gladiator Rubicon is the best mid-size off-roader. The Rubicon package just offers so many cool off-road goodies, not to mention the best approach, departure, and ground clearance of any of these mid-size trucks. And how can you argue with that? So guys, why don't you go down in the comments below, let me know what you think of all of these different mid-size off-road packages. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit subscribe and come right back here to the channel, because we're going to keep bringing you the latest news, views, and real world reviews. See ya.